Hi everyone, my name is RaNelle. I am the other TA in the class. Sharonik previously gave a wonderful lecture on John Donne, and now it's my turn. Today I'm going to give you a lecture on Shakespeare's The Tempest. I am an early modernist, and I love to research and study early modern drama in particular, especially Shakespeare. So I am very excited to talk to you guys today about The Tempest. So let's get started. I'm gonna share my screen with you. All right, so I personally am not a huge fan of PowerPoint. So what I have is a handout in PDF form that I'm gonna talk to you about and scroll through. So let's get started on talking about William Shakespeare's The Tempest. So I think I first read this play when I was in undergrad. I think my freshman or sophomore year was the first time I had read it. And I actually really enjoyed it the first time. I thought it was easier to read than his other plays like Titus Andronicus. Even though I now love that one, but the first time reading that one was rough. Attached here on the handout is a quote from the play, The Tempest. It's Gonzalo's quote. I'm going to read it to you now. He says, "Now would I give 1,000 furlongs of sea for an acre of barren ground, long heath, brown furze, anything. The wills above be done, but I would fain die a dry death." Oh, I just love that. Oh, yeah. We're going to get into this quote a little bit later in the lecture, but I just wanted to kick us off right away with that quote from the text. All right, so today I'm going to give you a brief introduction to eco-criticism. I'm going to do an eco-critical analysis of the play. And in the next lecture meant for Wednesday, Professor Gilman will touch on other critical approaches. Because this is one of Shakespeare's more popular plays, there are a lot of various critical approaches that have been taken towards this text. These approaches include post-colonialism, feminism, and even like meta-theatrical approaches as well. Eco-criticism is a relatively newly recent field of criticism, especially in early modern scholarship. It is relatively new. So today I'm going to give you just kind of like a fresh look at The Tempest by applying eco-criticism to it. So what is eco-criticism? For those of you that don't know, it is basically an analysis of the relation between humans and the environment in literature. This is a very general definition and very broad for a reason. The possibilities of an eco-critical analysis are unlimited. I mean, an eco-critical analysis could simply be an analysis of the meaning of nature. It could be an analysis of binaries such as like the human and the inhuman. nature and civilization. It could be an analysis of the representation of different aspects of nature within literature as well. And there's many, many more possibilities as well. But those are only to name those are only a few. And people still today are coming up with new ways to do an eco-critical analysis in text. So yeah. So how might we do an eco-critical analysis of one of Shakespeare's plays, particularly this one? Well, we can start by looking at how the sea is featured in this play. So in order to do that, I've organized this lecture into 3 main parts. The first is looking at the sea as a place of crisis. The second is looking at the effect of the sea. And the third is looking at Caliban's vulnerability to the influence of the sea. So let's move on to part 1. The sea as a place of crisis. So how can we think of the sea today? In his book called At the Bottom of Shakespeare's Ocean, Steve Mentz claims, "If the sea is around us, it is also always outside us. It is a place on earth that remains inimical to human life. Even though our bodies, like our planet, are more than 2/3 water, we can't live in the sea." The most fundamental physical feature of the ocean for poets, scientists, fishermen, and swimmers alike is neither its mutable form nor its vastness, but its inhospitality. It's the place in the world where human bodies, if they are there too long, die. So this is definitely maybe an intense perspective of the sea. But I chose this perspective particularly because I think we can see this in the Tempest. I want to think more about the ocean or the sea as a place that's inhospitable for human bodies, a place where human bodies are not meant to live, or human bodies can die if they're there for too long. As like, I think of the sea as hostile to humans. In another quote in the same book of his, Steve Mentz also states, "An oceanic perspective speaks to our emerging sense that crisis, not stability, defines the world in which we live now." So when we're thinking about the sea and the Tempest, I'm going to challenge us to think about the sea as a place of crisis, not stability. And I also included this quote in here now because I think this idea of seeing the world as in a state of crisis and as unstable is something that we're all perhaps feeling now, or during this time of a pandemic. Things may seem unstable and we may seem like or feel like we're in a state of crisis. So this quote spoke to me, and I hope that it speaks to some of you as well. Okay, so now I want us to begin to think about the sea in the play. So how can we think of the sea in the play? Well, I think we can have some help from an eco-critical scholar named Stacy Alimo. In the anthology entitled Prismatic Ecology, she comes up with this phrase called violet-black ecology, which aims to understand the water of the abyssal zone as something rather than nothing, as substance rather than background, as a significant part of the composition. She asserts that the deep sea is not a flat, static background, but rather a place full of interacting material agencies of oceanic ecologies and human entanglements. So basically what she's talking about here is that when, if you have ever seen a photo of a photo taken of a deep sea creature, I mean a creature in the deep, deep sea, like in the area of the sea where humans can't go, where we send like technology down to take pictures of it. If you look at a picture of a deep sea creature, you'll just see like a pitch black, dark background, which should be like the water, and then you would just see the bright creature. And so what she's saying is actually that's not really what the deep sea looks like. What happens is the picture initially has a bunch of little other like colors in the background, other little things floating in the water when they initially take the picture. And so what happens is that editors edit all that background, all those background like things out and make it pitch black so that they can just highlight the picture of the sea creature. And so what she's saying is that gives us a false sense of what the deep sea actually looks like. The deep sea is not just pitch black, solid background. It's actually full of life and full of all these little like colors and little like fish and animals and little things in the ocean, in the water. So why did I give you this quote? Well, in a similar way to how she sees the deep sea as neither static nor flat, nor existing purely as background, I think that Shakespeare's Tempest presents the sea as not simply setting or background, but rather he places the sea in the foreground, giving it a strong presence and even an influence of its own. And we're going to explore this and look at how he does this. All right, so let's look at some quotes from the play itself. In the initial shipwreck scene, there's a lot of things going on, but there's a moment where mariners enter the scene and they're saying, all lost, two prayers, all lost. And I really want to think about this phrase, all lost, in this moment, right? They're in the middle of a shipwreck in the ocean. We don't really know where they are. They probably don't really know exactly where they are either. Yes, there's different theories of where they can potentially be, but it's nowhere confirmed in the text where specifically they are. The phrase lost here, it emphasizes their hopelessness, obviously, like everything's lost, like all lost, like they're in a hopeless, they think that they're in a hopeless situation. It also emphasizes their facing of death, because they all think that they're going to drown and die in this shipwreck, sorry. And it emphasizes their lack of specific geographical location as well. I mean, they are all lost. But I want us to think about it in relation to the sea, and I think it shows us how the ocean is not our home, not a place where we belong, but rather a place where we are, quote, all lost. So now let's look at this quote that I initially put up at the start of the lecture from Gonzalo. So these are his last words in the storm. He says, "Now I would give 1,000 furlongs of sea for an acre of barren ground, long heath, brown furze, anything. The wills above be done, but I would fain die a dry death. So what is he saying here? He's basically saying, man, I would give up all of the sea for just some land to die on. I would much rather die on land than die in the water by drowning or in this shipwreck. That's basically what he's saying in this moment of crisis. But think about how emotionally charged this could be. I mean, he says this as he thinks he's going to die. It's like, oh, it's like, imagine if you were on a ship and you were experiencing a shipwreck and you really think you're gonna drown and die, and you're just like, man, like if I had a choice, I would much rather die on land. It's just so Dan Brayton is another early modern eco-critical scholar, and he has a book called Shakespeare's Ocean and Eco-Critical Exploration, and he actually talks about this quote right here. And here's what he has to say about it. But behind Gonzalo's explicit wish for ground is a longing for epistemological surety. The sudden squall in which the Italian aristocrats find themselves threatens their persons and their knowledge of the world. They do not know where they are or what is happening to them. The loquacious counselor uncharacteristically finds himself incapable of explaining his own and his compatriots' circumstances. He is at sea, literally and figuratively. So Dan Brayton just kind of brings attention to this idea. I think where I'm getting at is that, you know, they're lost. He doesn't know where they are. And they're at sea. So, I mean, he's lost at sea. And he not only just wants physical ground, but he wants some sort of grounding as well. So what I want you to get from all of this is that Gonzalo's words reveal how frightening the shipwreck situation actually is. You know, here we're seeing in the shipwreck situation that the sea, being at sea is not glamorous or fun, but it's horrifying. You know, it's not portrayed here as adventurous or exciting. It's terrifying. And Gonzalo's quote reminds us that the sea is a place where one does not wish to die. So now this moves us to our second section of the lecture called The Effect of the Sea. So what does the sea do in the play? So returning to this shipwreck scene, right? There's a point where various voices are heard. I believe we're not told exactly who the voices are. I think it just says like voices from within are saying these things. And they say things such as, mercy on us, and farewell, brother, and we split, we split, we split. So I really want to think about the phrase, we split, and what this means. So the splitting refers to the ship dividing and breaking during the shipwreck, obviously. But let's think about this phrase some more, right? It can also emphasize how the sea has the ability to, quote, split or divide humans, you know, separating them from each other and even from life itself. So now that we've thought about this phrase that's said and how it relates to thinking about the effects of the sea, The question that we have now is, where else in the play do we see the sea's influence of splitting? And now this moves us to the third and final section of the lecture today, called Caliban's vulnerability to the influence of the sea. And the question I'm posing for this section is, what happens, or for this part of the section is, what happens to Caliban? So the setting of the play is on this island, right? In the middle of like the ocean, but no like, there's no precise geographical location. Yes, some people argue that it's obvious where it is, but I'm not considering that. I want us to think about it as an unknown location. So the shore, if you think of the shore of the island, right, the beach, there's a splitting there. The shore of the island is where there's a split between the land and the sea. So as Caliban wanders the island in the play, how can we see him too as being split? Is he himself somehow split between the land and the sea, similar to the shore? Or can we even see him as being split kind of between the human and the animal? So there's a point in the play where Caliban has this long speech. I didn't put it's not super long, but he has this little speech to Prospero where he, and I'm only taking a small part of it because I really want to focus on this part of his speech where he says to Prospero, "This island's mine by Sycorax my mother, which thou takest from me." So Caliban makes it clear that he's had his home taken away from him. This is really interesting to me because this makes me see him as a homeless wanderer on this island. And I think we can see him as someone who is, quote, lost, like the mariners when they're at sea in the shipwreck and they say, "Oh, lost." Caliban himself is lost in a way because he's had his home taken away from him. And so thinking about him more as a character who lives on the island, land surrounded by sea, and thinking of the shore of the island as a meeting place where the land and the sea constantly interact, Caliban wanders this island, constantly encountering this shore, constantly encountering this meeting between land and sea, or this divide even between land and sea. Furthermore, Caliban's wandering state makes him vulnerable to the influence of the sea. So let's explore this a little bit more. In this next part of the section of Caliban's vulnerability to the influence of the sea, I want to ask, what is Caliban? So there's a moment in the play where Trinculo and Sebastian, I believe, encounter Caliban for the first time. And Trinculo says something really interesting when he sees him. He says, sorry, hold on. Let me take some water real quick. Trinculo says, "What have we here? A man or a fish? Dead or alive? A fish. He smells like a fish, a very ancient and fish-like smell, a kind of not of the newest. Poor John, a strange fish. Trinculo also says, legged like a man and his fins like arms. So I think his mentioning or his description of Caliban as a sort of man and a sort of fish is really, really interesting, especially if we're trying to think about the influence of the sea on Caliban. In his wandering state, Caliban becomes animal-like, half man, half fish. Since he's forced to walk along the place where the land and the sea meet and are constantly split, or they're constantly meeting and splitting, he himself is vulnerable to a sort of splitting between human and sea creature. So another type of criticism that is like related to eco-criticism is animal studies and animal criticism and animal theory. And if we had more time, I would kind of dive into that whole thing too. But that's kind of like we're touching on it a little bit here by thinking of his like half human, half animal state. And continuing on and thinking about Caliban and what he is exactly. Dan Brayton, again in his book, Shakespeare's Ocean, he has an interesting proposal. He thinks of Caliban as a sort of merman. And so I'm going to read his quote to you. He says, Caliban is an ontologically indeterminate yet sensually powerful presence on the beach. Stranded by his European captors in a condition of servitude, he is also a kind of strand-dwelling and beach-combing merman, an apparently semi-human creature of the beach. So Caliban's, quote, strand-dwelling, or what I would call his like wandering state, that leaves him susceptible to the influence of the sea, is what allows part of his body to adopt the features of sea creatures. So I will say that Caliban is a very complex character, and there are a lot of different readings of him. Like there are wonderful post-colonial readings of him and readings that think about his race. And I don't want you to think that I'm discounting any of those readings by any means. All I'm trying to do is show you how eco-criticism can add more layers and complex to this character, and to help us see him in new perspectives and to add variety to his character. So just want to end on thinking more about Caliban and what he is. In Prismatic Ecology, another eco-critic, Jeffrey Jerome Cohen, explains the inhuman. He actually is a medieval scholar, which is really interesting. He says, inhuman signifies not human, of course, and therefore includes a world of forces, objects, and non-human beings. But inhuman also indicates the alien within. Any human body is an ecosystem filled with strange objects, and requires as well a consideration of the violently inhumane. So Jeffrey Jerome Cohen is basically saying that the inhuman includes everything that's not human, of course, and things that can be perceived as outside the human. But it also makes us think about what is inside the human as well that may seem, quote, alien. And so I think our eco-critical analysis today of Caliban reveals the ways that he can be seen as inhuman. And our analysis of the sea has shown us that it can have an effect on the characters, particularly Caliban. And I think it shows us how Caliban is not wholly separate from the natural environment, but rather entangled with or influenced by the sea. And this is something that is also a big part of eco-criticism as well. Like there's a part of eco-criticism that advocates for thinking of how humans are always connected to and entangled with and not separate from the environment around them. So to us, Caliban seems to be inhuman in the sense that he has, quote, alien aspects of the sea within him, meaning that he's a wanderer who's part human, part fish. We can see him as some sort of merman. And so I hope that thinking about, you know, the sea as a place of crisis and the effects that the sea can have, and then finally Caliban's vulnerability to the influence of the sea and thinking about how he can be inhuman, has opened your eyes and been fun for you. And I hope that it's sparked an interest in eco-criticism and in Shakespeare as well. I hope I've shown you that Shakespeare is so much fun. And one of the things that I love about reading Shakespeare is that each time you read his plays, you can just like discover a whole new meaning or discover a new perspective on it. And you know, his plays are just so dense. Like think about Caliban, there's so many aspects to his character that we can talk about all day long. Eco-criticism is just one aspect, or eco-criticism shows us one aspect. And so I just want to share with you some final thoughts, and then I'll let you enjoy the rest of your day. So I want to reiterate that I am not saying this is the only way to view Caliban or the only way to analyze the play. I'm just trying to show how an eco-critical analysis can add complexity to our understanding of Caliban. Also, I want to mention that there are many other moments in this play where the sea is mentioned. So I encourage you to find these moments for yourself, you know. Think about them, analyze them, think about what's going on in these moments. One thing that I like to do is, especially if I have a digital version of the text, is I'll just do like a word search. And so you can search like the sea and see all the different moments where it's mentioned in the text. And there's some examples that I have here for you of where else the sea is mentioned that I haven't talked about is Ariel's song, for example. He sings about how the sea has a sort of like transformative effect. Miranda mentions the sea at a certain point, which might be of interest. And to some people, and there's a strand of eco-criticism called ecofeminism, I believe, that might aid with analyzing that, her relationship to nature and the sea. Also, Antonio talks about the effect of the sea when he talks to Sebastian about Clarabelle. Professor Gilman actually mentioned that point to me when I was giving him or sharing with him some notes of my lecture today. And of course, there's other moments too. So feel free to explore them all. And that is all I have for you today. Thank you for watching and listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Please feel free to email me if you have any questions. My email is rkb337@nyu.edu. If you're in my recitation, I would encourage you to hold your questions actually until our recitation on Friday, because we're going to talk about this some more. Also, good luck on your papers, and I hope you are all excited to hear about your fun final that I have planned for you. All right. I hope you all have a wonderful day today. Bye.